There's some interesting news circulating recently about the unlock or token unlock schedule for Hedera, as we will be seeing just over 6% of the supply releasing within the next couple of days. This video will be exploring what is actually happening with that released HBAR supply, why it is happening, and of course, what are the potential implications, as well as my thoughts on that. I'll cover that as well as some additional news of use cases across the ecosystem, as well as look at some different DeFi options, as I've received many comments for you guys to explore things like Pangolin, which I'll cover in this video. First thing I wanted to jump across and look at though is this tweet from Hedera, which is taking a very subtle dig at Solana. Solana recently again had a 20-hour roughly spout of downtime on their mainnet. Health and safety standards in any industry are crucially important. Some things, of course, never change. We at Hedera understand the need to provide a consistently functional, optimally secure, and probably fair technology for Web3. Stay safe out there. We will always have open arms. So we can see uptime first, days since the last network outage. This is the subtle dig, of course, 935. Of course, Hedera has never had a unplanned network outage. And then caution, fair ordering only, because of course transactions on Hedera cannot be front run due to how Hashgraph works behind the scenes with things like gossip to gossip. Right then, looking at this token release, then there was recently a thread published by Hedera over on Twitter. As previously shared, Hedera makes payments to 𝗟𝗠𝗡 for ongoing work under the outsourcing contracts. And of course, this dates all the way back to when 𝗟𝗠𝗡, of course, originally sort of invented, if you will, Hedera Hashgraph itself. And of course, that was patented until, of course, recently, what was it? I don't know, 6 to 8 months ago, it went fully open source. 𝗟𝗠𝗡s then span off separately from Hedera, so Hedera can run itself as its own operating entity. But of course, 𝗟𝗠𝗡s are still doing a lot of the development, the core development at Hedera. And of course, there are outsourcing contracts in order for that to run smoothly. I mean, that is pretty typical across many different types of software and enterprise businesses across the globe today. Nothing unusual about that whatsoever. The payments for these services are made as prepayments of HBAR, so effectively payments of the HBAR token from Hedera's locked up treasury vault supply are released across the 𝗟𝗠𝗡s to cover things like staffing costs, tax liabilities, etc., effectively to help 𝗟𝗠𝗡s run their business. Because of course, like I said, the intellectual property was handed over to Hedera, and then 𝗟𝗠𝗡s span off as a separate entity, with periodic adjustments based on actual expenses and the HBAR market price. Today, on February the 24th, 2023, Hedera will make a payment of 1.5 billion HBAR for the 2023 periodic adjustment for actual expenses and market price. Then again, on the March 17th of this year, Hedera will make a next prepayment of just shy of 2 billion HBAR for services in 2024. So effectively, the full upfront amount for 2024 and for 2023 will be paid over the next 30 days or so across the 𝗟𝗠𝗡s. Both payments are based on a trailing 30-day average closing price, which was as of December 31st, 2022, so substantially below what we've effectively seen recently due to the run. In addition, Hedera will soon be making the final payment to 𝗟𝗠𝗡s Inc. Of course, this is making some people, I guess, a little bit upset, because if you'd taken the 30-day trailing average, say it was around 10 cents, for example, 9 to 10 cents, whatever, it would be double the price there. They would have effectively received half the number of HBAR. So if we sum these together, let's say it was 3.5 billion HBAR, they'd have received roughly, 1.75 billion tokens instead of the 3.5 billion. To cover the tax liability for the previously announced intellectual property purchase of the Hashgraph algorithm, which is what I was talking about a minute ago. In combination, these payments will create transfers of approximately 4 billion HBAR. This will be reflected in the release supply report by some industry trackers and shortly in the Hedera Treasury Management Report. Credible actually has a very good reply to this. The payment for these services are made as a prepayment of HBAR with periodic adjustments based on actual expenses and HBAR market prices. Does this therefore mean that 𝗟𝗠𝗡s will actually return portions of that HBAR back to Hedera if the actual expenses they incur for the years are less than the predetermined or prepaid amounts? They've not responded to that yet, but maybe that will be the case, and then portions of this HBAR will be refunded. Me personally, my stance on this is that the sooner the supply gets released in its entirety, the better it is for the long-term longevity of Hedera as a project. Anyway, this is something that happens across the industry, so be it. There's not much we can really do about it in terms of how this has been set up behind the scenes. And of course, people may get upset about price action in the short term as we currently see it, but these are long-standing agreements between 𝗟𝗠𝗡𝗙𝗥𝗥𝗔𝗟𝗦. Of course, they were one and the same before we'd seen any of the market prices. People that are going to get sort of salty about this taking place now, could you imagine if they released 4 billion tokens at 50 cents when we'd seen that previous all-time high, and then 𝗟𝗠𝗡𝗙 had dumped all of that onto the markets? They'd have a lot more money then than they will do now. That's the second thing to be said as well. There's nothing to say that these 4 billion tokens will be sold immediately. In fact, it's highly unlikely these 4 billion tokens will be sold immediately into the market to raise capital for 𝗟𝗠𝗡𝗙, because of course we can see that the prepayment for 2024 is happening, and that's just shy of 2 billion. So at least half of the tokens they'll be receiving probably won't even get sold for a long period of time. And then the other, say, 2 billion will be sold periodically over 2023 to cover expenses as they arise. Therefore, you aren't going to see a massive supply side shock to the HBAR token price in the short term as much as you potentially see. Of course, this could spook some different retail investors, whatever it may be. Me personally, a reduction in the HBAR price is always a good thing in the short term, as I am looking to continuously stack those bags for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's my 2 penny worth on it. Of course, people may have differing opinions. Token unlocks, of course, pick this up as well. So we can see the cliff unlock, 6.3% roughly of the total supply, roughly $230 million, just over 3 billion HBAR to be releasing in 1 day and 10 hours, 33 minutes. You guys can keep an eye on this on token unlocks if you wish to do so. You can actually check the breakdown of what's happening with this unlock supply. So 4.5% of the total supply of HBAR will be unlocked for ecosystem and open source developments, which is partly what we just spoke about. Purchase agreements as well, you've got 500 million HBAR there. Network governance and operations as well, 337 million HBAR, or just over 0.5% of the supply. And then we can see the remaining unallocated supply, 31%. You've got 24% for ecosystem and open source development, 22% for purchase agreements, and network governance and operations at 15%. Cool. Let's take a look then at some of these different DeFi updates that we've got from across the space. And of course, like I said, wanted to take a quick look at Pangolin for you guys as well. SaucerSwap has been integrated into MySeas, an extension-supported mobile decentralized application browser. Now the protocol is recommended in the browser's DEX section, making it easy for users to swap tokens on the go. The world's first mobile 3 web browser with hashpack support. So of course, really nice update from SaucerSwap. Not only that as well, there was a little sneak peek from the team over on Twitter of a new user interface or UI update, which looks very clean, I must say so myself. And right at the top of this, 3.07.23. So that looks like the 7th of March, 2023 is when we'll be seeing this go live, if I'm reading that correctly, as a US formatted date. Hopefully it is, but of course I will be featuring this in a video once it does go live. Really looks like a tidy up of the interface that was already very clean anyway, but this makes things just that much more simple. I do have plenty of different videos on the channel talking about SaucerSwap, how to provide liquidity, how to swap tokens, and also how to stake Source for XSource tokens. And we've obviously got additional phases to that staking return coming in the near future. So make sure you check those videos out to make sure you're up to date with what's actually going on over at SaucerSwap. Transparency is a right, not a privilege, reserved for special interests. Now and always, Hedera will strive to uphold that value not only for our community, but for Web3 community as a whole. Hello Future. And of course, I completely agree with this. I do this a lot when I talk about different projects on the channel. Of course, I am one man. You shouldn't just listen to anyone on the internet. Effectively, I'm just recording videos to give you guys information. You should be doing your own research. I've seen a lot of people speak about HeliSwap or HeliSwap. Of course, I've covered HeliSwap in the past when they released their sort of exchange, the decentralized exchange itself for you to be able to swap tokens. And very recently, they've done a novel way via something called a lock drop to release their Heli token, which of course has sort of gone into the locked phase. I did tweet at them over on Twitter. I saw some different things from around the community, and I also noticed something a bit strange at the time with their supply. So over on their documentation page, here you can see highlighted where I tweeted at them, we have a hard capped maximum supply of 888,888,888 Heli tokens, which will be allocated to different buckets. The Heli tokens will then be released gradually over the next 5 years or 60 months following HeliSwap's emission schedule. All cool. However, unfortunately, when you went onto the sort of hash scan information, or if you tried to associate the token, if you were taking part in this lock drop event, where effectively you deposited HBAR to receive a share of the Heli tokens that were being released, it actually had a supply key which effectively enables an infinite supply because they themselves can release more tokens based on the token ID. If Heli is the governance token, though, I asked of the DAO, is there on-chain governance contracts to keep the supply decision with the holders, i.e. will this supply key effectively move to the DAO where it's completely controlled by users that hold the Heli token themselves in order to vote on proposals such as increasing the token supply in the future. I then just said as well, it does seem a little bit misleading for many, particularly that those participating in the lock drop now can't withdraw their HBAR with 3 months of linear vesting, especially if they base their decisions on the documentation page, which clearly says a hard capped maximum supply, which isn't really the case. You can't hard cap a maximum supply if you have a supply key, which enables you to release more tokens in the future. They did actually respond to me though, basically just talking about their decisions as to why they did this. So here's Max replying saying, if you mint a token, you do so with a supply key or not. Including a supply key makes the pool infinite on Hashscan. You can't add a supply key later after you've minted those tokens. Makes sense. We decided to include a supply key as we have some ambitious goals that expand beyond the capabilities of a simple DEX. For that to happen, we think that there is a small possibility that we will need to increase the supply to support such new business models. If we were not able to, we would have to migrate the entire Heli ecosystem to a new token instead, which of course is a very poor user experience. Completely agree with that. That makes total sense. At HeliSwap, we communicate everywhere that we care about the UI and UX the most, so not an option for us. We make sure the supply key won't be triggered unless absolutely necessary. Its control is transferred to the DAO once launched under not so easy parameters. So the only way for the supply to be increased is if it makes absolute sense to the members of the DAO. The HeliSwap DAO is not gated through NFT, but anyone holding the token can engage, making decision a question to many people, not a group of individuals. So that's really cool, but still, as I said, my initial gripe was the fact that in their documentation pages themselves, they didn't actually allude to this. And then unfortunately, they did respond saying, basically, it was already available. The lock drop contract and hence the Heli token ID was public at the start of the lock drop. We never made a secret of it, but they also never put it at the forefront of people's minds, saying that there is a supply key and potentially we have these lofty ambitions in the future for things to change. Since me saying that on Twitter anyway, they have gone and revised their documentation pages saying we have a supply of 888,888,888 tokens allocated to different buckets instead of them being hard capped. So for any of you guys investing in this platform, just be aware there is a supply key. They will potentially in the future, if they grow significantly, put a vote to the DAO of token holders to increase the supply. That may affect your decision as to whether you want to hold any of these tokens. By contrast, tokens like Source are completely hard capped at their limit. There is no supply key. They can't change the supply in the future. And the same goes for other tokens, HTS tokens within the ecosystem. They are completely hard capped. HSuite is another one. That's a hard capped token. There is no supply key. They can't change it in the future. And that is the information. Take that with a pinch of salt, just covering the news of what's happening across the ecosystem and what HeliSwap have been doing. They seem to have been quite successful recently. And obviously many of you guys wanted to see a bit more information about it. Right then, on to the last sort of decentralized exchange that I want to be covering today is, of course, Pangolin. Now, again, many of you guys have been asking me about Pangolin and sort of my thoughts on it. I must admit, when they originally launched, I did check it out on their Twitter threads, and it was a bit of a botched launch, actually. None of this was functioning properly. It wasn't prompting Hashpack to open when you were changing exchanges, etc. However, they appear to have ironed out all of those sort of minor defects, and it appears to be functioning really well at the moment. I haven't actually used this platform yet. However, I may in the future, but I did want to talk you through a few different things that are available on here. So, of course, you've got the standard swap site, which is exactly the same as SaucerSwap, HeliSwap, HBAR suite, all of that. Traditional trade from token A across to token B functions pretty well from what I can tell. The other thing to bear in mind is they do have an additional token that they've created called PBAR, which is Pangolin HBAR effectively. Now, do not make the mistake of thinking that PBAR is similar to, say, HBAR-X, where the value is derived from the HBAR token itself. PBAR is similar to any other HTS token within the ecosystem. It effectively has no underlying value whatsoever. The value is completely being obviously made up by the supply and demand of that particular token. And of course, that's tied to the performance of the Pangolin ecosystem and the Pangolin on Hedera. I've seen some people mention HBAR and PBAR because the average APR of this liquidity pool is 560% annually, which of course is incredibly high. You can see a TVL there of just shy of 1.1 million US dollars. But the thing to bear in mind is, of course, when you are liquidity farming and you are supplying liquidity to these farms for returns, is you are subject to impermanent loss. I'm not going to cover it too much in this video, but effectively it is the volatility between the pair of tokens, which can actually see the value initially deposited deviate from where you started from. I have a dedicated video talking about impermanent loss and liquidity farming, which you guys, of course, can check out to learn a little bit more about this. But because 𝗟𝗏 has no associated value with HBAR, that means the tokens can sort of wildly vary in value between one another, and there is the potential for impermanent loss to take place. So you are at risk of impermanent loss on this particular pool, as with any pool, if you do decide to take advantage of this. But of course, it is 560% APR. Traditionally, that should offset any impermanent loss you do see. The one to note that I did quite like the look of is, of course, HBARX and HBAR. Again, in my dedicated liquidity providing video, I talk about why you shouldn't really see impermanent loss across this particular pair. And that is because they move in tandem with one another, because HBARX is actually a derivative. Its price is being derived from the HBAR token itself. And we can see an average APR there of 44% annually, which is a very healthy return and much higher than any kind of native staking that's available. TVL of just shy of $3 million. And of course, there are some other more lucrative pairs on here if you are willing or sort of want to try and take a bit of a risk to earn a little bit more of that APR. These all come under the name of super farms on their pools and farms page. But like I said, these guys as well do have some support from Hedera and the HBAR Foundation. There were some different things that went out. It does appear to be very safe. And of course, it has been audited. Not only that, Pangolin does operate across several different chains, which you can see here, from Ethereum all the way through to Avalanche and Near, Hedera being one of the latest ones. So this is, of course, a battle-hardened provider, effectively, of decentralized applications and exchanges. So you should be safe as far as that goes. Of course, always be wary of when you're sort of connecting to things. Make sure you've got the addresses correct. Go to their Twitter account and then come across to their address via those links. But you guys can check this out in more detail if you want to do so. The other thing to bear in mind as well is you get these things called staking SARs if you do stake via the Pangolin DEX, which is a novel game theoric single-sided staking for PFL, PSP, and 𝗟𝗏. So this is particularly for that 𝗟𝗏 token on Hedera. So staking Pangolin tokens, i.e. this 𝗟𝗏, creates a SAR NFT, which is called the Sunshine and Rainbows NFT, a position which manages your stake tokens and the APR. The APR starts from 0% and grows based on the staking duration. So obviously, the longer you hold it, the increase in APR that you see. SAR NFTs can then be traded on the secondary markets, such as Sparkles, which I think is probably for Flare Network. That's not Hedera Network. And then effectively you can see your staked SAR NFT position, use the widget on the right hand side to interact. They've got like a full blown tutorial here on the Pangolin DEX if you decide to buy 𝗟𝗏 and stake it. Probably because many of you will be wondering what the actual APR for 𝗟𝗏 staking return actually is, as it currently sits at the moment with a total value or total 𝗟𝗏 of just under 5 million. The average APR is 566% annually, which of course is incredibly high. I believe I just saw the price somewhere of 𝗟𝗏 sitting at 17 cents. If you guys are interested, if you guys do actually want a tutorial on how to do this, I will buy some 𝗟𝗏 and do a video showing you guys how the staking mechanism actually works over on Pangolin. Let me know down in the comments below. More than happy to do that for you guys. Right then, let's just round off the video. I just wanted to look at some different bits of interesting news from across the ecosystem. There are still many people on Twitter that are in complete disbelief of how many transactions per second HBAR can actually process. See this random guy here called DB Crypto, who's apparently an entrepreneur and content creator. Sorry to break it to all the HBARians, but the majority of transactions are unnecessary, just as they are on Solana. Not sure about that. HBAR only does around 3 to 5 TPS on average. Again, I'm not sure about that. All can be verified on the Explorer. Definitely incorrect on that one, 100%. If he'd actually have gone to the Hashscan link himself, he can see that it's definitely doing more than 3 to 5 transactions per second. And this just goes hand in hand with some other people as well. 𝗟𝗜𝗡𝗏 has done a fantastic thread, as he always does, over on Twitter, talking about why the transactions per second on Hedera are, of course, completely real. I've covered that so many different times in my video, but it's effectively summed up as The consensus service is a public notary service. It logs that data immutably with fair ordering. There aren't no vote transactions or anything of the sort like Solana does, which artificially inflates. Probably not intentionally, it's just by design of how the Solana network works. Those transactions, those vote transactions, are just wrapped up in how the transactions are summed together. And of course, they aren't real immutable transactions that are being processed by a third party per se. And of course, more information here from 𝗟𝗜𝗙𝗘𝗥𝗥𝗔𝗟𝗦 as to why we love Hedera. Every HCS transaction is, of course, those low predictable fees paid for the user by the dApp. They are real transactions paid for because they create real value, unlike a vote transaction, which is someone just effectively pressing a button and spamming the network to fulfill transactions. These are all being paid for on Hedera, therefore they are completely real. And of course, we all know and love the fact that it's 𝗟𝗜𝗦𝗖𝗟𝗏 that is producing the vast majority of those transactions at the moment. We are looking for more of those use cases to go live in Q1 of 2023. There was a really interesting article over on Reddit, which I pulled up here just now, where some guy called 𝗟𝗜𝗏𝗡 spent the last 6 hours coming up with some new finds. There are some other unannounced HBAR Foundation use cases, one called 𝗟𝗜𝗏𝗡𝗏, which is a new way to connect with fellow seafarers, find job opportunities, and stay up to date with the latest maritime news. You've got Universal Digital Coupons, the Joint Industry Coupon Council. They're basically asking how we continue to grow the coupon industry. Can we get the awareness, implementation, and execution? These go hand in hand with things like the Coupon Bureau. It looks like that they are really beginning to gear up to move onto the Hedera network themselves. It's been a long-term kind of plan for those guys, and hopefully we'll see them go live in 2023. Hopefully as well within the first quarter, maybe the second quarter at the latest. We're seeing movement and commitments that will be gaining momentum into 2023. The economy has impacted this. Don't forget about the little guy. We have accelerator partners to help all of our partners, including but not limited to those little guys. We need to make sure the manufacturer coupons are also redeemable online. Next calendar year is going to be the year. Procter & Gamble as well is releasing content regularly. Once you see national retailers come online, it will really take off. Brands putting out high dollar values to drive change, sensing a lot of urgency with this particular group or this particular umbrella use case of coupons. And of course, Hedera is a very good place for those to rehome themselves, of course, being a fair and immutable DLT system. Another use case as well, EarthID, has been part of Hedera for a couple of years now. But effectively, the idea here is employ blockchain technologies to decentralize ID data and provide verification of credentials to create a powerful ID management system to be put in the hands of individuals. The collaboration will enable individuals to aggregate all of their multifaceted data related to their identity for healthcare purposes, whilst maintaining complete control. There's a potential healthcare use case there somewhere as well being worked on behind the scenes for Hedera. As always, the future is definitely bright. Hedera continues building, whether it is a bear or bull market scenario, it doesn't really matter. Everything is still working and churning along behind the scenes. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, leave a like, drop a comment if you've got something to say. You can always reach out to me directly on Twitter as well. Make sure you follow me over there. I do post a lot of different stuff from around the crypto space on a regular basis. And until the next one, I'll catch you then. Cheers.